Good day. The Colonial Marines seen in Aliens are pretty much the very first depiction of Space Marines in film. And let me tell you something, it was a great first impression.
They were badass. They had cool weapons, cool ships, and let's face it, they were Marines, the most awesome of all the armed forces. Now, before I get 2 tons of hate mail and some letter bombs, I will admit that I may have some bias when it comes to Marines. You see, my grandfather was a Marine. But that aside, the fact is, the Colonial Marines were great in just about every piece of media that they showed up in. But of course, there are at least a few exceptions, and that exception is what we're going to be taking a look at today.
And now we come to Colonial Marines. Now this was a 10-issue series that followed the adventures of a single squad of Colonial Marines. Now this sounds like an awesome premise, right? Well, it suffered from many problems. The most important of which is the fact that it started out as a 12-issue series, but they must have ran out of money at the end or something like that, and thus it had to be scaled back to 10, which basically meant that the ending had to be rushed. And let me tell you this, it was extremely rushed, which we will see in a moment. Now with all this in mind, let's crack open Colonial Marines and take a look.
Here is the very first cover for Colonial Marines, and it looks decent. It definitely could look a lot worse. The Xeno here is well drawn, but it is drawn in a more realistic style and looks like an actual alien life form rather than the Eldritch abomination that we all know and love. Also, the cover is just a little goofy here with the Xeno chowing down on a grenade. The next cover shows Vasquez's sister. Yes, her sister appears in the comic, and no, she is never seen or heard from again after this comic, although with good reason. This cover is much more stylized than the first cover and is slightly better than the first cover as well. We then get the next cover and we have a very poorly drawn Vasquez this time with a totally gormless look on her face. What's that? Is that an alien? Should I possibly shoot it? I don't know. The next cover just sucks. Look at this. It almost looks like a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles cover. Hell, the mouth on this one guy looks like one from the actual TMNT comic. The Xenos are just wrong in so many ways. This guy here has a completely idiotic expression on his face, and I don't even know who these people are supposed to be. And the colors on the cover are just washed out as all hell. And what is that gun? Why does he not even have a pulse rifle? And why does his uniform not match the other Colonial Marine uniforms seen in the comic? Moving on, cover 5 has slightly better artwork. The Xenomorphs actually look like Xenomorphs, and the Marines actually look like humans rather than mutated turtles. My one complaint here is, why does this guy have an AR pattern rifle on his back? I get that a pump action shotgun would still be good in the future, but seriously, just let the AR-15 pattern rifles die already. Cover 6 is awesome. We have the mercenary known as Mondo with a big ass gun, and the idea of a xenomorph hilted knife makes my inner Aliens fanboy cry out with glee. Mondo will of course be touched upon later. Cover 7 is by far my favorite. We have a well-detailed cyborg ripping the inner mouth from a Xeno while shooting it in the head. What's even better is the fact that this issue introduces one of the better characters of the series, but it promptly starts to suck pretty quick afterwards. And now we have cover 8. Notice that it doesn't say 8 of 12, but rather 8 of 10. Yeah, this is where the series plummets fast. The cover itself is pretty good and well detailed, however the payoff in the comic is not good at all. Basically, this android reprogramming is not really used against xenomorphs, but we'll get into that later as well. Okay, cover 9 shows just how bad the series sucked at this point. Who is this guy? He doesn't look like an Aliens villain, rather he looks like he should be menacing Flash Gordon. The cover for issue 10 looks great. The cyborg is well detailed, and we see that he just finished ripping apart some Xenos with his bare hands. Too bad nothing like this actually happens in the comic. You only wish something cool like this would happen in this particular issue. But all that aside, let's move on to the comic itself. The comic opens with a giant space gun shooting hazardous waste at a star. Rather fitting, seeing as how this is exactly where this comic should end up. All this does is set up the fact that aliens exist and that corporations in the aliens universe are titanically stupid, because some corporation decided to just load up a garbage barge full of Xenos and send it on its merry way, under autopilot no less, to a garbage station. And this wasn't an accident either, since the company who did this had to purposely program the barge to seek out the station. Why not just send it out into the void? Because space is bloody, well, huge. If you just sit it on a random course, no one's gonna find it. Also, this art style is pretty bloody bad. It's not horrible, but damn is it unappealing to look at. And guess what? Like with the covers, it is pretty bloody inconsistent. After the crew opens up this garbage barge, the xenomorphs proceed to kill just about everyone on the station, and then we cut to the Colonial Marine headquarters where we meet our designated hero, Lieutenant Henry, also known as Blandy McBlandenstein. Although he isn't that generic, he has a plot-mandated hero decay later in the comic. Right now, he is the generic military leader who doesn't like the powers that be and is tough but fair. Also, here it is mentioned that he has father issues, however, they never come up again. Well, until issue 10 for about a second. Essentially, for beating up a corrupt Colonial Marine officer, Lieutenant Generic here is being put on punishment duty. He has to go and set up a subspace relay, but that gets sidelined pretty quick anyway, so it doesn't really matter all that much. His team of Marines are, of course, the customary washouts and misfits, and of course, Henry has to whip them into shape. Oh yeah, the Marines also get saddled with a smarmy company rep. You can guess where this goes. So here are the band of misfits. We get a female sergeant who is overbearing and doesn't follow the chain of command. And then we get whatever the hell these things are. I guess these are humans, I can't really tell. Okay, first off, people don't look like that, and what the hell is up with her face? And why is she contorting her spine like that? Also, why are they clustered around hazardous waste? Anyway, the rest of the Marines are seen on the next page, and damn, could nobody draw a basic human? I mean, by Talos. Also, what is up with Vasquez's mouth again? I mean, good God, how long did it take her to learn how to make that expression? Also, you have to love this guy here with this expression of complete imbecility. Also, why is his mouth so angular? In fact, why is everything so angular? Oh, I know why. Because everyone in this bloody comic is a cookie-cutter cardboard character that has been seen numerous times before. So here is Carmen Vasquez. She is, of course, the designated younger sister, even though she can't be that much younger since she looks like Vasquez's age, and it hasn't been that long since the other Vasquez died. And since this comic is completely uninspired, she must not be tough or competent, but rather she is a complete screw-up that has never seen combat and is completely useless. And the rest of the Marines are, well, they're never really touched upon. They just are really red shirts more than anything else. Here we have Liston, or as I like to call, the BDO, or Big Dumb Object. He accomplishes nothing in the comic and generally just stands around saying that he can do nothing because he costs too much. So if he can't be used due to a substantial dollar value, then why include him at all? Why not just use a basic Bishop model android? And there are many times throughout the comic where his assistance would have been invaluable and he would have saved money in the long run. Now when the comic ends, we actually cut back to the space station scene earlier, and it turns out some of the crew members did not actually die. But they don't stay alive for very long because the station is attacked by bugmen. Ah, too bad they're never really explained, and they're not even a really good villain. Because in addition to looking titanically stupid, they are really no more dangerous than basic humans. So with the team put together, the comic ends. And in the very second comic, the team goes to the space station that was seen at the beginning of the first comic. And the art has gone from bad to worse. Now, instead of angular, the art is now soft and indistinct. And the xenomorphs are off as well. Why do they have red lips? What the hell? When they first get to the station, the company rep, instead of sending in the highly trained Marines, decides to use company troops. This begs the question of why he hitched a ride with the Marines at all. Why not just use your own ship? They, of course, all get slaughtered, and then we cut to the Marines not wanting to join in on the operation. In real life, they would probably have either been shot or just kicked out of the Marines altogether. Here, though, Lieutenant Generic has to punch them all out, and then they go. And here is a very disappointing bit of the comic. You see, Vasquez was an awesome character in Aliens, but her sister is a complete suck. You see, she is too cowardly to fight Xenos, because, you know, when you can use a badass name, you want to give it to a weak character. That also gets next to no character development. And really, the comic ends with, oh good God, what is wrong with Vasquez's face? That's scarier than the Xenomorphs. I'm not even sure a human face can make an expression like that. Ah! In any event, that face that looks like some sort of eldritch abomination's face
is supposed to somehow be Vasquez freezing under pressure.
One final thing to note here. The comic says that next month there is going to be the biggest firefight that I have ever seen. Aha, those are some pretty strong words, comic. Well, let's find out if that boast is true. Before we actually get to the firefight itself, here is comic 3. The comic basically just deals with the Marines trying to escape from the xenomorph-infested station. And so now let's get to the fighting, right? Well, it's not very good. It's literally just a 3-panel firefight wherein the Marines shoot at indistinct targets. You know, I think I've seen firefights just a little bigger than this. In fact, I can show you some just right now. Yeah, I think the comic is hoping the only firefight you ever saw was literally just some firemen trying to put out a bloody fire. Moving on from that, the art in this comic is slightly better than the previous ones. Everything is much more detailed, and people actually look slightly human. Now, while the Marines are escaping the station, they actually capture one of the bugmen, and they begin to question him. And the comic ends with a councilman from a colonial world taken to the bugman's base to be turned into one.
Now this may seem interesting, and this may seem like it's going to be a great little conspiracy. It's never seen or heard from again.
Comic 4 is actually where the series starts to pick up. The Marines arrive at Bracken's world, and some plot lines are introduced in the comic that are both stupid and somewhat interesting. The bugman that they capture starts giving royal jelly to some Marines in order to get them addicted, and then eventually escape and cause some havoc.
One of the few recurring elements seen in the Aliens series is the substance known as royal jelly. Essentially, it can be used as a performance-enhancing drug, and it is also highly addictive. And of course, our great heroine, Carmen Vasquez, is of course addicted to it, because all great heroes have drugs on their side.
The art style for this comic is vastly improved over the previous one. Everything is much more detailed, and the Marines actually look like the Marines from the film. Their mission here is to check out this base. When they do, they find that a bugman is talking on the view screen. And this just goes to show you that the bugmen are a horrible cult, because they just call the base. They don't bother checking to see who is actually in the base. They just call it up and start talking about their evil plan. You see, all they really had to do was just use an intermediary, maybe some kind of code, really a lot of amateur stuff. But what does this idiot do? He just calls the base and assumes the people that are supposed to be there are there. But what really doesn't make a lot of sense is after he realizes that he's talking to a Marine, some other bugman attack for some reason. I don't really know why the bugman would just be hiding and let the Marines walk in and then figure out what the secret plan is. And then just let the Marines walk in for some reason. I guess it's a trap, but then again, that doesn't make any sense because the guy on the view screen is clearly surprised that he's talking to a Marine. Now, all this idiocy aside, we actually get a bunch of good action scenes here, and it is by far the best comic in the series when it comes to action, and also it introduces a new xenomorph type that just looks awesome. The Marines fight the Xenos and eventually escape the Bugman trap, even though that Bugman trap made no sense. Comic 5 is more the same. Good art, great battles. My only complaint is the fact that this is where we start to see the hero decay of Lieutenant Generic, as he buys some bombs in town that can be placed inside humans. But we will get into that later. Also in the comic, the lieutenant also decides to modify the BDO to actually be useful. In the end, the Marines partially lose the battle to protect this town. But all is not lost, as the next comic has Mondo, the Xenomorph Hunter, come in and basically save the day.
Mondo is literally the only minor character to ever get comics of his own. He got 2 one-shots, and basically their plots all boil down to aliens infest, Mondo kill.
The guy is pure 90s. He has a ridiculously oversized gun, ammo belts, pouches, but unlike his other 90s contemporaries, he does in fact have 2 shoulder pads, because he is too awesome for just the one. The art in this comic is average. It is worse than the past 2 comics as evidenced here. I guess Lieutenant Blandy got his face melted in between panels? Also, it would appear that in this comic he also got his brain melted as well. In this comic, we learn what the Marines' mission really is. Now, they were originally supposed to do grunt work. They were supposed to help assemble a subspace relay. And this is an appropriate mission for Marine slackers. But we find out that that is not the case. They're not there to do work that would be appropriate to their actual skill set. Rather, they have to take on an army of bugmen. Yeah, they couldn't just send in some spec ops for this. They had to literally scrape together a Dirty Dozen style team to go take out a high value target. But it gets worse. You know how they all sort of came together and formed a fighting machine in the last two comics? Well, that's completely destroyed by the fact that Lieutenant Idiot here has bombs implanted into the Marines' necks that will explode if they go too far from the control device or Lieutenant Bland gets killed.
This is completely idiotic on no less than 2 levels. Level 1. Lieutenant Dumbass here is now a hated commander. The team cannot trust him. The team cannot respect him, mainly because he has gone from commander to owner. He owns these Marines body and soul. They have to worship the ground he walks on almost for fear of being killed by him, which means they can no longer function as a fighting unit. Furthermore, he lost all operational autonomy when he did this, since it's a proximity fuse. If they're not in proximity to the control box, they die, which means if you want to have a multi-pronged assault, you can't have that, because guess what? You send this other team on the other side of the planet, they're dead. Also, you basically have shot yourself in the foot when it comes to any accidents as well. Let's say you've got one part of the team in one ship and one part of the team in another ship. One ship crashes, that ship keeps going. The ship that crashes, if they survive, they're all dead anyway. Hell, even timing comes down. If one ship leaves slightly after another ship, the team in the other ship is dead as well. Basically, he just failed the mission without even doing anything. He was going along quite well, and then just made a decision that completely was irrational. And all this boils down to, this comic is a piece of crap.
This just comes completely out of nowhere and has zero precedent. It just makes no bloody sense. And then the Marines' ship explodes. This was a conspiracy plot that actually had a resolution. Too bad this is kind of stupid too. What kind of commander just leaves a paltry 2 guards on their ship guarding a highly valuable prisoner? If the BDO was so expensive, why not leave him there so that he can guard the prisoner while guarding his high dollar value?
And so this comic pretty much drives the final nail into this series' coffin. Now the next comic tries to redeem this series, but ultimately fails at the end.
This comic has some great characterization and introduces a really cool character, this android. He is a badass that leads a robot army to fight the Xenos. And they fight them fairly well, up until the Colossal Idiot Corps show up and completely screw everything up. First, we see Vasquez go crazy from the lack of drugs and kill an innocent robot that had just been trying to defend the facility that she had just entered. Now the Marines, instead of going, how could you kill this robot, just make fun of killing the robot and basically just treat the rest of the machines as tools. However, when a machine saves Vasquez's life, she begins to try to get her act together. Just a little bit. Now, the Marines are there to get some weapons for the coming fight against the Bugmen. They do get the weapons, and then they just leave the machines to get killed. And really, that's the last we see of this great android character and his robot army. They all die in the comic they show up in. A letdown, to say the least.
So yeah, you got an awesome premise, and then they kill off said awesome premise at the very end of the comic. Why even introduce this character if you're going to do nothing with him? Had he somehow, killed Lieutenant Henry and then assumed command of the Marines, that would have been awesome. This series would have actually really picked up. But no, they kill off one of the coolest characters probably in the Alien series as a whole, but then that same comic is introduced. Why could they not have expanded on the concept of an android leading a robot army against xenomorphs? That is story potential. Instead, he's dead, and we get to follow a crappy Colonial Marine commander and a team that is pretty much generic personified.
This is where the comic really goes downhill. The art is horrendous. I don't know what is up with her head. People are dying left and right, plot lines are being forgotten, and extreme dumbassery is taking place. the Marines finally have enough of Lieutenant Insanity's idiocy and stage a mutiny, only to have it fail because Lieutenant Fool here modified Liston to do something. And what is that? Beat up Marines. Yeah, that makes sense. And look at him now. He looks like the bloody Joker. When did Lieutenant Henry become the Joker? Why does he look like this? What led up to this? I want to know! Oh, wait. I know when this happened. It's when the writer decided to just say, he was insane. In any event, the Marines head out to a research station because it's on the trail to the Bugman's base.
Barring the final issue, issue 9 is by far the worst comic in the series. It is absolutely horrendous what goes on here. There are so many dumbass moves that it's not even funny. It's just aggravating. Sort of like, oh, I don't know, Alien 3? Really, by Talos is this comic horrible. I mean, it is really some straight drivel. Let's just take a look at it, shall we?
The art is the embodiment of suck. You thought it was bad before? Well, think again. It looks cheap. It looks indistinct. It looks like it was done by someone with zero talent. This is another station escape. We see the BDO actually do something other than victimize Marines, and he does it well. If he was this powerful, why didn't he do this earlier? He would have saved numerous lives. I know that the company is supposed to not care about lives, but think about how much it cost to train and equip the Marines and the company troops. Probably many times more than the cost of one synth. Also, at the end, we see just why you wouldn't want to use proximity bombs to control your troops. The Marines escaped the station, but the female sergeant can't get to the dropship. Now, if she, didn't have a bomb in her head, she could have just gotten to an escape ship, or they could have come back to pick her up. Instead, the lieutenant loses a highly experienced and effective NCO. Clearly, he is the next Napoleon.
And now we finally come to the final issue. And by Talos, I'm glad it's the final one because I don't know how much more I can take.
And now we come to the end, and good God is at the end. Everyone dies, and there isn't even a satisfying final confrontation between the Marines and the big bad. No, most of them just die on the way. Also, Vasquez is killed off in a very annoying manner. Now, the comic has been building up her character the entire time, only to have her get overwhelmed and killed before actually even meeting the final boss. And so here we have the final confrontation, and it makes no sense. Mainly because the comic has neglected to tell us about anything that is going on, like how this Bug King came to be, why Lieutenant Fool calls him Bradshaw, or why Lieutenant Idiot hates him to begin with. Then again, it gets even more confusing when Bug King here says he was once called Kleist.
If you haven't read every Alien comic ever written, if you haven't committed to memory every single one-shot villain ever introduced, you're screwed because you're going to have no idea who these people are or what significance they have to the story. And even if you do know all of this, it still doesn't make any Akatosh damn sense.
Now here we have the very final confrontation. Like, this is it. This is where the whole thing's been leading up to. This is the final battle. And, it didn't make sense before, right? We don't know who Kleist is. We don't know who Bradshaw is. I suppose if you've read the other comics, you might have some clue. But then, you're going to be completely confused by this. Lieutenant Dunkov here calls the Bug King father. Why? I have no idea. I guess it could have something to do with his potential father issues early in the comic, but those were never touched upon ever again. So why does he call him father? And that's not even the worst of it. There is no awesome final battle. Literally, Lieutenant Idiot just shoots him. That is pretty damn lackluster. There could have at least been some kind of a fist fight. The Bug King could have shot at him. Anything. Instead, we just have this piece of crap shoot a couple of bullets at him, and he's dead.
Ladies and gentlemen, when I was in grade school, there was a writer that came to give a speech to the class, and he basically mentioned that when he was a kid, at the end of every story he ever wrote, the world would inexplicably explode. So basically, if you had a romantic comedy, then that world would have to be Krypton, and the infant shot out into space to become Superman. But that is neither here nor there. Here's the thing. He was basically trying to say, write a good ending to your story. Don't just have it end abruptly with that. Just have a nice conclusion where all the plot lines are tied up. Well, apparently, the writers of this comic never actually went to grade school because guess what? That's what we get in this comic. The world blows up. Well, technically it's a space station, but you get the idea.
And so, at the very end, the station blows up, killing all but the BDO, who says that everything was completed within acceptable parameters. Acceptable parameters? Yeah. Everyone died, a multi-trillion-dollar spaceship was destroyed along with numerous space stations, and your extremely expensive, big, dumbass object was heavily damaged. That just goes to show you why Weyland-Yutani got bought out by Walmart 200 years later.
Now, if you're an Alien fan, you've already read this and are already as disappointed and sad as I am. If you're not an Aliens fan, don't even think about reading this piece of crap. Read Aliens Book 1 or 2 or The Female War or any other comic in the series. Really, what should have been a great military science fiction adventure was mishandled on all levels and basically just became an incoherent mess that is yet another stain on the greatness of Aliens.